Welcome back. This is part 2 of a two-part video series on silk over tissue. In the first video you would have seen that we applied tissue to this tailplane from a Dennis Bryant Hawker Fury Mark 1. It's had 2 coats of dope and is fairly well sealed. So now I'm going to use a thin consistency of wallpaper paste, standard Solvite wallpaper paste. I'm going to use a thin layer of that to actually stick this silk, which is very lightweight silk, onto the structure. Now the reason we're using wallpaper paste is because wallpaper paste is mainly made up of water, and as such we should be able to, once it evaporates, end up with an extremely lightweight application. Now I've never done this before, so you're seeing this in real time, and we'll see exactly how it goes. I'm led to believe the trick is to run a bead of paste right down the middle, so that's what I'm going to do. And it immediately wants to drag, so that catches you out. So I'll just keep going. I'm not going to worry too much about how much I put on. I think that it is going on all right. It's pushing through the material, through the silk, and seems to be adhering to the surface underneath without too much hassle. I'm going to go the other way now. I've got the sort of a line down in one direction. One of the things they do say you have to be careful of is to keep the weave running at 90 degrees to the object you're covering. So I'll have to see about that. I'll try and drag it a little bit, because silk, you know, you can twist it and distort it and move it about a little bit, but I think the object of the exercise is to keep the grain running up the grain. Yeah, I suppose it is the grain on the longest part. So in this case, tip to tip. Right, so we have managed to spread out a section all the way along. So now I'm just going to see if I can bring it down. And immediately we get some wrinkles. So I've got to be a bit careful here, I think. Very, very lightweight application of the brush, I think, so that we don't drag the silk too much. Now you can end up, and on the sort of the test one I did yesterday, so I know I said this is my first one. Well, this is the first one I've done with this type of silk. The test one I did yesterday, or I did 2 actually, both were done with different silks, and certainly not this one. This one is behaving how I would have expected the other 2 to behave, and they did not. So I'm quite hopeful with this one. It's looking quite good. This silk is from a silk company called Harrington's, and I believe they're in Nottingham or in the Midlands. And Bill Dennis put me on to these guys, and he gave me a catalogue number, because if you go onto the website and look for this silk, it's not there. And he discovered it several years ago and told me what the catalogue number was. So I rang them up and just basically gave them the catalogue number and asked if it was still a product that they carried or they manufactured. Whether they manufacture it or not, I don't know, but they certainly had it in their catalogue, and they told me they did. So excellent. I think the nice thing about this particular silk is it's 36 inches wide, So when you buy a yard of it, you buy a square yard. So that's quite good. Quite often with silk, it's not a yard by a yard. It's only a few inches by a yard. So this is quite good. Well, that's actually going on reasonably well so far. It's not looking great, but the thing with putting silk on top of tissue like this is the wallpaper paste does make the whole thing look awful. And I was warned about this. Somebody said, you know, just persevere, just push through it, keep going, don't panic, don't throw your toys out the pram. It's how it is. So you know, just keep going. So if that's what they said, that's what I'll do. So you know, they did warn me. Next morning you'll get up, you'll look at it and it'll have dried, because it does take a good 12 hours to really set. You'll look at it and you'll think, oh wow, that's great. I must confess, looking at it now, I'm not thinking, oh wow. That the tissue work underneath was really very nice on this, and it has been on nearly all the pieces I've done. I really enjoy applying tissue. It's one of those things that if it's done well, and I like to get it right, you know, it's very pleasing when it works. Right, I'm not going to say any more. I'll probably put some music on the video for this, because I'm sure you don't really want to hear me. So I'll talk to you in a minute when I've reached the end. Okay, and there we have it. It does look awful, and there are a few areas where it's just lifted, just along the leading edge there. There's a couple of little ripples, and along here. They're not staying down, so I don't know what will happen in the morning, and I think I probably just need to leave it at that. We'll have another look in the morning, and I'll run another video just to let you know how it's gone. Alright, cheers for now. Well, it's another day. I've come back to find that the wallpaper paste has dried, and I'm not sure how much of this you can actually see, but just there and there, move it in, see if it catches it. There's two wrinkles, there's a few wrinkles here and there, there's a few sort of wavy lines, and it's not terribly good. It's also not very smooth. It feels kind of rough. I go to the tissue side, you know, it's really smooth. So I'm not, because I've not done this before with this material, I'm not sure how it should end up. To give you an idea of what I've already done, here's the rudder. Now this is lovely and smooth. Really, really, I don't know how much you can see, but that really is smooth. And that's one coat of dope on top of that. The material under there, there's tissue, and then on top of that there's a chiffon silk. But I'm not absolutely certain it is a silk, because if you look at the edges, it's all frayed, and you usually get that with a polyester. So I'm wondering whether that's a polyester silk. I don't know. Now if I can get the edge to actually sand so that all this fluff has disappeared, then terrific, then maybe this is the answer. But at the moment the edge is too fluffy and I can't do a lot with it. So I might try, there's been 2 coats of dope just on the edge to try and, you know, make it stiff enough that it would then sand, but it's still not working. So maybe a little bit more work is needed on this. But if I could get that smoothness and finish using that silk, then that would be great. But that's not where we're at now. I'm tempted to put a coat of dope on this and see if it improves, but I don't think it will. But to make that smooth, I think there's got to be a lot of dope go on there to make it smooth, to fill that up. So difficult to know which way to leap now. So I think I'll ponder some more and have another reread of some of the articles. The only thing that I can think of is that maybe the wallpaper paste is too thick, and it's ending up lumpy, and that's what I can feel is the lump. Because if you feel the silk itself, it's not rough, but this is. So, all right, bit more thinking, and I'll come back later. Here we are again. Well, actually, that was a total disaster. The silk was just too rough, so one peel and it just came straight off again. So the wallpaper paste doesn't really stick it on that well. Obviously the dope that you subsequently apply to the wallpaper paste is what actually holds it on. So not entirely satisfactory, shall we say. So I've taken the silk back off. It's not left any residue or anything like that, so I'm going to have another go, but this time I'm not going to do the whole of the underside of the elevator, the stabiliser, because it just seems a bit wasteful really, and it's time consuming when it actually doesn't work. So what I've done is I've made up a fresh batch of wallpaper paste, and this time it's much thinner than it was before, so it's still, I don't know whether you can see that, it's you know, I tipped 3/4 of the jar out and then filled it back up with cold water and then, you know, sort of stirred it all in. So if it's the thickness of the paste that's causing the issue, this next little test should answer that question. So, as I said in the previous video, where's the rudder gone that I did? I did this rudder using a chiffon type material, and it's a really shiny and very close weaved silk, if it is in fact silk, and I've got a feeling it's polyester. But anyway, it was very cheap. It was $5.99 a square yard, which again alludes to the fact that it might be polyester rather than silk, because it's very cheap. But the finish is really nice. So I've added another 3 coats of dope to the edge, which, if you remember, it was really frayed and horrible, and I just couldn't get a finish on it. After another 3 coats of dope around the edge and let it dry and then sanded it, it's actually now okay. And that again falls in line with what happens when you use polyester. You can't show polyester sandpaper until there's at least 3 coats of dope on it, and I think that's what we're seeing here. So at the moment, even though I'm supposed to be doing silk over tissue, my front runner is chiffon over tissue. So that might be the way to go, and it really feels tough, but it's a nice weight. It's not too heavy at all. So and it's beautifully rigid. It's really nice. I'm impressed. And 1 coat of dope is all that's had, and it's sealed. Well, there's a couple of tiny little pinholes, but they might be through the chiffon to the tissue, but it looks pretty sealed to me. So 1 coat of dope on top of that is excellent. The silk probably take 2 or 3 coats, so it swings and roundabouts which route you take. Anyway, at the moment I'm going to put another coat of I'm going to put this Harrington's silk on top of the stabilizer using the very weak solution of paste. Okay? So off we go. I'm just going to hold it down and try and run a seam right down the middle as I did before. And that's going on more like water. That looks better already, but we'll just have to see. It brushes out much easier. So we'll see what we're getting. I mean, I did see on one of the notes that somebody had sent me was make sure you don't make the paste too thick. So maybe that's a warning I'd listened to and read, but hadn't actually taken note of. Well, that actually seems pretty good. So I think all we can do, let that dry and see where we go from there. The saga continues. I'm still waiting for the Harrington silk with the much thinner wallpaper paste to dry, but it's looking encouraging. However, looking at the silk a bit further, the silk itself feels a little bit coarse. This is the Harrington silk here that I'm using. It feels lovely and fine and everything, but if you compare it to this, which Andy Sefton very kindly sent me, this is Esaki light silk, and it feels a bit like tissue, whereas this feels more like cloth, and I think that the Esaki is much finer weave, much finer weave than this Harrington silk. So although Bill Dennis has said that I needed this very specific silk in replacement to the Esaki light, I think that Harrington silk is still too heavy. Okay, and that's why I'm getting such a rough finish on this, because this is still rough, and it's going to take a lot of dope to fill that up. So what I'm going to do, just as an exercise, I'm going to take a square of this very valuable Esaki silk that Andy has very kindly donated, because I need to know what's going on here. Okay, so we've taken a small section of this Esaki silk, and what I'm going to do, hopefully you can see this, I'm going to wallpaper paste the genuine Esaki lightweight silk to the tip of this elevator, okay, and then see how it feels. I think that's probably the best way. I have heard from Mike Woodhouse, and he does have several packs of green lightweight Esaki left, but he has nearly run out, and it's just about only green he's got. Okay, so here goes. Just going to soak the brush a little bit because it's still wet from where I washed it, so I don't want to dilute the paste any further than it already is. So. Okay, so here goes. So this is Esaki, genuine Esaki silk, straight over tissue, doped tissue. In this case, the doped tissue has had 3 coats of dope, 2 coats of dope, sorry. Right, I can immediately tell you it's much easier to put down, much easier. But where there's a bit of a crease in the silk, it's not laying down. Right, so that's gone on really quite well and fairly easily. So the root cause of all my problems may well be that the silk is much too coarse. So there we have the Esaki silk, wallpaper pasted straight on top, and as you can see there's lots of waves in it and stuff like that, but let's see what happens. I am a little bit concerned about, there's a small crease, or there was a fold in the Esaki silk, and it's sticking up a little bit. They do say that you should iron the silk, so that's possibly what I should have done first, is ironed it just to make sure there was no creases. But what I'm really interested in is this area here, you know, ignoring the crease, and just see how that feels when it dries. Is it smooth? Is it nice? I may even go as far as putting a layer of dope on there just to see how it works, but obviously I've got to try and recover the tailplane at the end of the day. Okay, so more later. The experimentation continues. This just about wraps up the video, I think, on silk over tissue. This end of the tailplane, you can see, is covered in the Harrington's silk, and the wallpaper paste was a very thin solution, and that is the answer. Thin solution of wallpaper paste is all you need, and it has shrunk nicely down, and it's flat, but it's not smooth. And I think the reason it's not smooth is simply the weave. It's just a little bit too coarse. Okay, now it may well be that 4 or 5 coats of dope will sort that, and you'd put 4 or 5 coats of dope on probably tissue anyway, so I'm in a bit of a dilemma as to whether or not you keep persevering with this and you put several layers of coat on to get it finished. So, not ideal, okay? However, and this was the reason for the series of films, this is genuine Esaki silk over tissue, and you can see it's beautifully smooth. Those wrinkles that I was worried about have gone. They've completely, and it feels just like an extra layer of tissue, and it definitely feels stronger. It doesn't feel as strong as, you know, as the Harrington heavier silk, but this is only the thin layer of wallpaper paste on top of tissue which has only had 2 layers of dope. This I could quite easily put one light layer of banana oil or dope on top of, and that would be it. It would be ready for paint. So I think Esaki is the way to go on a smaller model, but for a big RC model such as this, well, and even so this isn't that big at only 60-inch span, 1/6 scale, it's still going to require 3 or 4 square meters of the Esaki silk to cover it all, and at £20 a square yard, and almost impossible to get nowadays, I think you've got to think very carefully about whether it is a viable option. For a, you know, a smallish outdoor free flight diesel type model, I think this would be absolutely perfect. But for slightly bigger models, you're now entering the realm of Diatex, Oratex, and that sort of stuff, which pains me to say it, but I'm not sure what the solution is. But for me, I think I'm going to draw a line under this, because that Esaki silk over the top of that tissue has worked, and that's the process that you would use to achieve that sort of finish. But for me, I think it's going to be too expensive and too difficult to do in a few years' time, when the what little supply of Esaki silk has dried up completely. So we either persevere with this, which I think is going to take quite a lot of dope to make it usable, or there is one last option, and that is to use the chiffon that I was talking about earlier. And here is the rudder that I covered in this material, and it is beautifully smooth. It really is lovely, and that's 1 coat of dope on that to seal it. The problem, as I said earlier in the video, was the edges. If you try and wrap it round a sharp edge, it doesn't like it. And after 1 or 2 coats of dope, if you try and sand that edge to get rid of the fluff, forget it, it doesn't work. It just fluffs up worse. So after 3 or 4 coats more of dope, it's finally started to smooth off. And it's still not perfect, but it's better than it was. So that chiffon silk, even though I don't think it is actually silk, I think it's a polyester, is only £5.99 a square yard. So that might be the answer, and it feels really tough. So I think this is probably what I'm going to do. Anyway, there you go, silk over tissue. Probably a bit more than you expected, and you'll probably sleep well tonight. Alright, take care, bye.